Archives and History. And we are so excited to have you joining us today for a conversation with John Allison. He's the archivist at the Morgan County Archives. But before I introduce our speaker, I do have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make. As we all know, today is our kickoff installment in the next slate of our Research Rundown series. And the rundown, it airs every first Monday of the month at noon. And this slate is going to run from October to May. It is broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube. And as always, if you are unable to make the live broadcast, or if you want to refer back to a previous installment or share an interesting rundown presentation topic, the rundowns are recorded and they are posted to our official Archives YouTube channel within a day or so after the initial broadcast. So also wanted to mention before we get going with the rundown that we do have a food for thought coming up. It's going to be on October 17th. It's also at noon. And we are going to be exploring the collections of the Air Force Historical Agency with Timothy Brown. I'm very interested in that one. I'm definitely going to tune in for that for sure. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. John Allison. John is entrusted with the care of Morgan County's oldest government records, some of which predate Alabama's statehood in 1819. He holds a bachelor's degree from Birmingham-Southern College and a master's in history from the University of Maryland. He is a past president of the Society of Alabama Archivists and currently serves on Decatur's Historic Preservation Commission. So welcome, Mr. Allison.
Thank you. My pleasure. So I really enjoy the opportunity to tell the public about the collections that we have here at the Morgan County Archives. And just I'll give you a little bit of background about us. First off, where we are, we're in Decatur, Alabama, right in the old part of town on Bank Street. And we're at 624 Bank Street. And our telephone number, if you want to go ahead and jot it down, is 256-351-4726. And best way to get in touch with me is through my email, which is jallison@morgancounty-al.gov. So that's getting that out of the way. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the archives. We've been here since, well, the archives has been here since 1995. It was created by the Morgan County Commission to deal with the backlog of records that had been produced and the current records that were being produced by the Morgan County Commission and by all the other departments of Morgan County government. So including things like the revenue commissioner with tax maps and tax records, the circuit court, and indeed all the court systems, both the circuit court and the previous courts, jurisdictions, obsolete jurisdictions like county court or law and equity court, all these other previous old court jurisdictions. We also have probate, which is probably the biggest, not probably, it's definitely the biggest contributor of records to the archives. If you think about anything that goes through a probate court, that would be, in the case of Morgan County, of course, any kind of wills, settlements of estates, marriage records, commitment records, guardianship papers, all these kinds of things. And so, as you can imagine, that's of great value to genealogists. But we do also have many other sorts of departments that contribute to our records here as well. One thing that's interesting about the probate court as well, and I don't know if the Morgan County Archives is unique in this manner, but our funding, a large chunk of our funding comes through the probate court. So there's a filing fee on records that are, anytime something is filed with the probate court, and a certain percentage of that fee goes to the Morgan County Archives to assist us in our mission. And then the county commission makes up the difference of our operating costs. So that's just a little bit about what we have as far as official government records. I can say that the use of those records, I mentioned genealogy, of course. Most of the researchers who are watching this would be aware of that, and the great value of estate records, marriage records, things like that. But these records also come up in just practical day-to-day matters. Lots of times people want to get a pistol, and it's come up on they have some kind of an incident in their past that's preventing them from being able to purchase a firearm. I had one gentleman a couple of years ago who had stolen an 8-track player back in 1972, and this was still on his record and was preventing him from getting a pistol. But there are other practical things, court records that we have coming up to, some of them pretty frequent, pretty recent. So, property records every year at tax time. We have to produce we have to get people the valuation of piece of property when they inherited it or when it was sold at a certain point. And so that's another thing that comes up. We work with a lot of local attorneys and a lot of these types of issues as well. But really the funnest thing, the most fun thing for me is working with researchers who come here. In addition to genealogists, we have a lot of authors. We have some academics who come here to look through our records. We're pretty fortunate in that our probate records are pretty much complete. Our county commission minutes are pretty much complete. We have court records going back to circuit court records going back to about 1880 or so. And we have property tax records going back to the 1890s. So those are the two chunks there are big chunks of those records groups that are missing from both property tax and for the court records. It's a shame because we see in 1939, there was a WPA Writers Project where they did inventories of all the local archives in Alabama. And we can see that at that point, we had complete runs of newspapers going all the way back to 1830s. We had all our court records. We had all our property tax records. And unfortunately, it seems that a lot of those things were put in a wet basement and were allowed to sort of mold and decay. And so that's the story I know with a lot of archives around the state. You'll find a lot of them they're stronger in one area and not so much in another area. And sometimes that's just due to the accidents of history, fires, and where the records were in the basement, whether or not the rats got to them or not. But these are the kinds of things that we deal with on a daily basis. Of course, everything now is kept dry and well. We're well cared for in climate controlled circumstances now here at Morgan County. But a lot is if some of your viewers today may be wanting to know about how to research our records. If you want to look at probate court records, the best way to gain access to what's in our probate court records is to go to the Morgan County Probate Judge's website, because there's a digital inventory there and access to old indexes that will tell you where to find books and page numbers of certain deeds, mortgages, and the like. There's also an index, and indeed, I think most of the Morgan County Commission minute records are also on that website as well. So we work hand in hand with the probate judge on a lot of these issues, and we're working every day to try to bring more content online. A lot of our content is also on Family Search. So, If you want to search for a marriage, say, I think they have them currently up to about 1956, I believe, is the date. After that, you'll want to contact us here at the Morgan County Archives as well. So but again, more things being brought online all the time. But if you want to come here in person, there's plenty of reason to come here if you're researching someone in Morgan County history, because we have a lot of things that have not been digitized. The probate records being a big chunk of that. Although the Genealogical Society of Utah has digitized them, they're not available online as of yet, and they're not indexed. So, but I understand that that's in the works. But you can always call me. We're sort of technologically backward, but we're also very helpful. So you can call me at the number that I gave you earlier, or email me, and I'm more than happy to assist you with your research. We also do have special collections here. We have the collections of the Morgan County Genealogical Society. So a lot of their members over the decades have gathered all kinds of material, genealogical material, pedigree charts. So a lot of people doing genealogy research will find that the research may have been done for you. We assist a lot of people with their DAR applications, for example. And so very often we can just pull out some work that's been done previously, and you'll be able to have that link readily available to you. We do also have bound newspapers, original copies of newspapers going back to 1919. And then we have some individual newspapers. Earliest one we have is from earliest Morgan County newspaper that we have here is from 1878. But we know that there are others in the collections of the Alabama Department of Archives and History. But very often, a lot of our patrons do enjoy looking through the original newspapers rather than microfilm. Not always the easiest way to copy, but there's a certain aesthetic pleasure that comes with turning the pages of those original volumes of newspapers. We do have photograph collections as well here. Just random photographs that have been donated to us over the years. Several of them have been pulled together into some books that have been published over the years. But we also have some individual collections that are of particular note. Probably the most famous collection we have here is the collection of photographs taken by photographer Fred Hiroshige here in Decatur at the Scottsboro Boys trial of Haywood Patterson back in 1933. And so we have 127 negatives here in our collection, original negatives that came from the estate of Mr. Hiroshige. And so they're in high demand. They've been published in a number of books, used in some documentaries as well. And they really tell the story of that trial in vivid detail, vivid visual detail. As you can see, the defendants, the accusers, and the various parts of the court, the officers of the court, and the witnesses. And those are going to be used also. They've been used in the Scottsboro Boys Museum, which is in Scottsboro currently, Scottsboro Boys Museum and Heritage Center. But then also here in Decatur, we have a new Civil Rights Museum in the works, and the Scottsboro Boys collections will play prominently there as well, because Decatur was the site of those trials in the 1930s, all except for the very first trial, which took place in Scottsboro, hence the name. But you can learn more about that here at Decatur. We have another collection that I'll be talking about actually next week. If any of the watchers today are members of the Society of Alabama Archivists, Uh, you'll have a chance to hear me talk about a collection at next week's meeting in Opelika. It's a photographer named Albert French Harris, who was a photographer active here in Decatur from around 1895 until about 1920 something. We're not quite sure of the end date there, but he owned a photography studio and a amateur photography shop on Bank Street. He called himself the Kodak Man. And so there are both professional photographs taken by him and also the Brownie photographs taken by his wife. And so there's some wonderful snapshots in there, as well as sort of more formal photographs of Decatur. Found some original images previously unseen of President McKinley's visit here to Decatur in 1901, shortly before his assassination. And also various subject matters. There's some wonderful shots of African Americans here in Decatur that have surfaced in that collection as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that collection with people. But there's a number of other collections that just come in all the time. We recently got a collection of slides that have wonderful images of Decatur in the 1940s and 50s, look as vibrant as the day that they were taken. So we're constantly blessed with these new collections coming in, and processing them can be a challenge, but we try to stay on top of that weekly as we go along. Unfortunately, there's no way to browse those photographs online as of yet, but I encourage you, if there's some subject matter that you are interested in, please just contact me directly, and I'll be happy to help anybody with those requests. We do also have a number of museum exhibits here at the Morgan County Archives. That's one thing that I have really stressed since I got here in 2006, is building up our museum exhibits with the help of Senator Arthur Orr, who's helped us find some funding for these things. We have an exhibit, a permanent exhibit about the Scottsboro Boys trials. We also have a permanent exhibit of the Morgan County, the Civil War in Morgan County. There's a third one called Morgan County Comes of Age, which takes you from the days of Reconstruction through to about to the Tennessee Valley Authority in the 1940s, sort of really the transition from a almost purely agricultural economy to an industrial economy, and also everything that went along in those days. There's about segregation, about the wild steamboat days and the crime that took place here in Decatur in those wild days. And so there's a lot of interesting subject matter in that one. We also have an exhibit on the veterans of Morgan County. And so we have rotating material there and an interactive touchscreen that can help our visitors to hear the stories about veterans here in Morgan County. We also have some other exhibits coming up. We've just secured funding to build some more exhibits, including one on prehistory, on sort of paleo societies and archaic societies that lived here in the days before the arrival of whites in this area, and also about our early pioneer period here in Morgan County. So all that is available to you, or will be soon. So we encourage you to come visit us. We're here from Tuesday through Friday. I actually am here on Monday and will answer phone calls and emails, but that's a day that we play catch up here with our paperwork and various housekeeping tasks. We're closed to the public on Mondays. But from Tuesday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, we'd like to invite any of you to join us up here at the archives. So that's my short spiel. If anyone has any other questions for me, I'd be happy to talk about them. I know, Courtney, you had a few that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you so much, John. That was really interesting. I personally don't have any like genealogy connections to Morgan County. I'm pretty much down here in the like Chilton County, Watauga County, sort of that realms where my family is originally from. But I'm very interested to see your museum exhibits. Sounds really great. This is a question that I think probably a lot of archivists would ask, do you have any collections that you particularly enjoy or any favorite collections that you like to work with at your archive?
Yeah, I really do enjoy the photograph collections. That's been, especially when new ones come in, and the sense of discovery as I'm bringing these images up, scanning these images, and seeing things that haven't been seen for generations sometimes is a great pleasure. But my favorite part of the job, I think, is just helping people do their detective work. I love seeing a photograph of a public place and trying to figure out where this was. I love helping people track down ancestors and uh, learning more about their properties. That's another thing we do here in Decatur a lot, because we have several large historic neighborhoods, helping people learn about their homes and who lived in those homes. So that's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about working in archives is you never know who's going to come through the door that day,
That's right.
and it's almost always something different.
Yeah.
Every day, you might find you might be working with totally different collections each day of the week.
Hmm.
So
That's right.
that's the beauty of it. Have you found any interesting, shocking, surprising things, objects, uh,
Yeah.
documents in your collections?
We found some interesting things and a couple of shocking things. In the shocking category, we found a murder weapon, which was folded up into a file. It was a folding pocket knife that was apparently used as a murder weapon back in the teens, I think, the 1910s. Uh, so that was shocking. But we have also found probably the most interesting thing, a story about found artifacts, was we opened up a probate file and it had a big stack of uncirculated Confederate bills in it. And the story there was, as I read the file, there was a man named Riley Davis who had died intestate and also pretty much broke, except for his slaves. This was in about 1861 that he passed away. And so, in order to satisfy his creditors, the sheriff of Morgan County was obliged to rent the man's slaves out to various farmers in the area to try to gain revenue to pay off this man's debt.
Right.
Well, of course, the war progressed, and more slaves left these, and some of them just took off on their own recognizance, freed themselves, and by about 1864, also there were Union troops stationed here, so the days of renting these slaves out were over. And so, what seems to have happened is there was still a balance left on this man's uh, on this man's debt, and so someone just put this stack of bills, now worthless bills, into the file. Say, well, if they want to come get it, here's the money. But of course, then the war was over and the money was no good. So
Wow.
that's the only way I could just explain how it happened.
Yeah, that's
Pretty,
quite the story.
yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned a pocket knife. We actually found one. One of my coworkers was scanning or working with the Supreme Court case file, which are huge bound volumes. And when you get more into like the mid 20th century, you're more likely to stumble across things like that. They're exhibits, is what they were
Right.
that were submitted to the court. And we also found a rusty pocket knife taped into, like
Taped into it.
a piece of paper and stuck
Uh,
in the back of that volume. So it's just what a coincidence that we just
yeah.
found our own pocket knife. I don't know that it was necessarily a murder weapon, though. We could never figure out the significance to the case that, like the case number it was labeled with. But anyway, just a coincidence there. So we
Someone
did
thought
have
of
a
it really putting in the record. Yeah.
so we did have a question from Deb, and Deb says, "Would you have any records on the early part of the National Guard based in Morgan County? Lieutenant Shirley Alden Tisdale, who died in Arizona in 1917, his wife was in Morgan County."
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any National Guard records. We could probably look through, our newspaper collections and things of that nature, and maybe some of the genealogical records here. But yeah, we don't really have any National Guard records on hand here, unfortunately. But we may be able to find out some more about Mr. Tisdale by doing some research in some other record groups. So I encourage her to contact us, and we'll see what we can do for her.
Yeah, and Deb, we actually have quite a large collection of records on soldiers that served in World War One here at the archives. World War One was sort of the last conflict that the state was really heavily involved. And then after that, World War Two and the more recent conflicts, military service just became a lot more federalized. But we have service records, we have draft cards here for World War One. So we might be able to help out with that type of research as well here at the state archives. Um, so with that being said, oh, I did have one more question that occurred to me while I was listening to you speak. So has Morgan County had any courthouse fires? I know you mentioned a wet basement, but has there
Yeah.
been any document loss due to courthouse fires?
Yeah, we did have a courthouse fire, a couple of them actually. One pretty spectacular one in about 1928. Now, thankfully, the probate records were in a vault, but some of the circuit court records were destroyed at that time. So, it's just, and we also had, in addition to a courthouse fire, we had a lot of the records were moved in the middle of the night from the previous county seat of Somerville to Decatur, and legend has it that the earliest marriage volume went missing at that time. So the very earliest marriages in Morgan County from about 1818 to 1822, I believe,
Mhm.
are sort of lost to posterity. We don't have that. So
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. We do research here for patrons at the archives in all 67 counties of the state. So that's a good little tidbit to store
yeah,
away for us on the marriages. All right. Well, I don't know that we have any more questions from the audience, and that's all of my questions that I had. But we thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. I know that our researchers greatly enjoyed it. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on today's rundown. Don't forget to tune in next month. It'll be the first Monday of the month at noon for our next rundown, and then also October 17th for the food for thought.
all right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Courtney.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.